Yeah.
As anyone who likes to read the credits on albums know, on virtually every one of Michael's.
Yeah, I mean, we started. It's interesting actually. As kids, my dad was a musical instrument maker actually, and he used to bring home, you know, an array of instruments. You know, everything from drumsticks, clarinets, trumpets, guitars, etc. And I had a guitar, and George sort of gravitated towards the drums with the drumsticks, the pillows and the biscuit tins, literally. And we used to kind of like just write songs and knock them out at that very young age, at 5 and 6.
So were you in the executive then?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
I was a good-looking one. Yeah.
And you were also in Edge of Heaven video, I noticed, which we
indeed.
saw on there.
Yeah.
Yes, there's lots of clips where you suddenly. And of course, the most famous song that people know, which is again in the film, is "You Have Been Loved."
Oh yeah.
It's probably the most famous collaboration.
I think there's two songs which are favourites of George, and actually, I think "Praying for Time" and "You've Been Loved" are his two favourite songs actually, and or they were his favourite songs actually, and yeah, "You've Been Loved" was the first track that we actually put down for Older, and yeah, it was the first track that we started recording for Older, and it was the last track that we finished on the album actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And another favourite of mine, just because I want to mention it now, because it gets overlooked. John and Elvis Are Dead.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's great fun.
Thank you.
But let's move on more specifically to the film. I think one thing that's quite interesting about the film, we were talking about this before.
Is Louis here?
Louis Walsh.
Where is he? Ah. Okay. And then we've got Ali, who's sound design. Worked on George. Worked on the film. Give him a round of applause. And producer Lisa. I think you might know Lisa.
I was just say with the film.
Right, you'll fuck off now. So.
They had like the original intention of when you first set out to do it, which was more the focus of it changed a few times during the journey of the film, and I thought it might be quite interesting to talk about that, because at the beginning, as far as I understand, the intention was pretty much to focus solely on Listen Without Prejudice,
yes, of course,
for the 25th anniversary, but it became the end result became something quite different.
Yeah, I mean, we just finished making Symphonica, and we launched the album, and we knew that the sort of 25th year anniversary for Listen Without Prejudice was kind of looming, and our initial intention was to make a film which addressed the making of the album, the making of the video with the supermodels, the David Fincher supermodels, or the 5 supermodels rather, that David Fincher made, and the court case that surrounded it. So that was the kind of original arc of the film. And as we kind of got into it, our production started researching, and we found 75,000 feet of the David Fincher 35mm footage that he'd shot with the 5 supermodels. And we looked at that, and that led to other things. We started exploring the archive a little bit more. And then, you know, it didn't take very long to realise that actually, you know, there was a bigger picture here to tell. And, you know, we got into everything. We started, you know, chronologically, really, from we addressed the early days, just before Wham, you know, through to Faith, the making of Listen Without Prejudice, the court case, the Sony court case, which was important, and really kind of finished up at the Olympics.
Yeah.
You know.
One thing that occurred to me was, did obviously all the huge names that appeared from Mary J. Blige, Gallagher, Stevie Wonder, they had their special albums pressed up on vinyl.
Yeah.
Did you keep those?
They did actually. It was George's idea actually, and we made acetate. So I don't know if anybody knows what an acetate is, but an acetate is kind of in the old days when you go and you'd make a record, you would when you made vinyl, you'd press it onto a thing called an acetate, or it was basically a softer kind of material where you get maybe 2 or 3 or 4, 5 plays. The sound would start deteriorating. So we made acetates for each and every one of them, and George kind of chose 3 or 4 tracks that we put onto each acetate. Everybody, the lawyers, the record company people, and all the contributors and the supermodels. And the idea is, the original idea was that we would play this music, film them listening, and we talk about those particular tracks off of the album. And of course, we got them all to sign them as well.
Right.
And I am the very proud owner of 20-something signed acetates with Stevie Wonder as well. Actually, it's quite sweet.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we've got them there.
I bet they won't be on eBay anytime soon, will they?
I don't know. I think we'll have to do something good with them, won't we? Really, you know.
So, in terms of your collaboration as co-directors,
Yeah.
how did that process actually work? Because the credit is yourself and George as co-directors.
Yeah.
How was
I'd
was
say
he there at the actual filming of those interviews, or would that all be you, or how did that?
No, that was me. George is quite like Charlie, really. You know, he just makes that call. You hear him on the little thing, and he doesn't quite turn up. But nobody knows who Charlie is. Okay, there you go. No, how did it work? We tried 2 or 3 directors, a couple of directors to start to begin with, and while they were great at what they did, it just wasn't quite right for us. And we always knew that we wanted to make this. I mean, we talked about this. Myself, George, and Lisa had talked about this just continuously, and we knew what we wanted to do. And so really, George and I decided, after we kind of kicked off, George and I decided that, well, actually, you know, why don't we just make this ourselves? And the way we worked really was, and we kind of made it on the fly. You know, originally we did have beat sheets there, and we did script it to some degree, but to be quite honest with you, we knew the subject matter so well, and you know, we knew each other intrinsically, you know, and it was just a natural thing for us to. We basically made it on the fly. Really, we'd literally, which was a bit of a nightmare for Lisa, because we'd basically phone up and say, right, we need Stevie Wonder tomorrow. All right, we need to get Nile Rodgers. Okay, we need the supermodels. We need this. We need, you know, and that's how we made it. We filmed it. We edited, but we knew how to build the dynamic into film, because and we made it exactly the same way that we made records. Really, you know, made albums. It's all about dynamics, you know, which is exactly how we edited it together, which is exactly how we mixed the sound of the film. Yeah, that's kind of how we made it.
Yeah.
And literally, we would edit in London during the day. We filmed it all around the world. We filmed it in Paris, New York, LA, where else? Barbados. Anywhere else? London. No, we didn't do Milan in the end. We were going to do Milan. We almost filmed Donatella in Milan, but that didn't quite, just schedules and timings didn't quite work out. And literally, yeah, we filmed it around the world. We got everything back to London. We have an editing suite in the office, and we'd edit, send stuff down to George in the evening. I'd go back to the house in Goring. We'd meet every night, have dinner, talk about the next step, the next day, what we wanted to do. It was literally like that. And we pieced it together.
This is over the course of...
how long was it? Over how long?
A year and a half.
A year and a half of actual solid work like that, yeah. And then at the very end of it, you know, George came in and started editing himself. And of course, if you guys are not aware of this, George was pretty hands-on with all of his editing. So much so, I mean, when he made the David Fincher video with David, I mean, he took that, and I think that's George's edit. You know, he'd seen David's cut. Even though David lit it beautifully and filmed it beautifully, that's George's edit. Pretty much the same with all the Andy Morahan stuff. Pretty much the same with the Joseph Kahn stuff. Freak George, you know.
Yeah.
So George was
too funky as well, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I think we talk about that in here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny actually. There is in the film there is there's an interview that Kirsty Young did. We got Kirsty to interview George for the film because we were trying to work out how we were going to put George into the film, and the initial idea was that we were going to listen to his record collection in Goring at his house, and we were going to pick records out, and I was going to ask him, well, what about that record? What about this record? So, for example, when I found a dollar record in his collection, you know, I pulled it out and said, well, what about this record? What about this dollar record then, Jörg? And he'd say, well, actually, no, I bought that record because Trevor Horn produced that record, and I really like the drums on that record. And I said, oh, fair enough then. And that was how we were going to interact originally. And then we were sitting down watching the Kirsty Young interview with David Attenborough, Sir David Attenborough, and she did such an amazing job. Did you see that?
Yeah.
She's just brilliant. And George had worked with her before. We thought, oh, Kirsty. So we got Kirsty down. What was the question? I've forgotten.
I've got two actually. The general process, basically.
Red line.
Yeah. Okay.
Think about the red line. The red line.
How did you decide how George Michael was going to appear in the...
That's right. How are you going to present and get him involved?
How you were going to present him?
That was what you started talking about.
That means nothing. Trust me. If I start to... No, but actually, what did you just say? It was
the red line.
Oh yeah. So
Young.
yeah, that's right. And we were talking about. But there was something very interesting. What I was actually getting on to say was that Radio 2 documentary that we made.
Yeah.
It kind of went out on various platforms around the world, but I only ever gave contractually. I never sold it. I gifted it to people. Actually, he knows because I gave him the nightmare of making it. But we only used 15 minutes of the raw material.
Yeah, not a lot.
Yeah, and there's this interview which is George's. Oh, I know what I was saying. Yeah. So in the film we've got George's last interview as well, which is the Kirsty Young interview, and he talks about. That's as far as I remember, but yeah. Anyway, go on. Next
One
question.
thing that
Why didn't he want to sort of narrate it?
He did narrate it.
I mean, I know he narrated it, but appearing it in the last year.
Why? I just don't think that George appeared in anything in the last few years. I mean, when we got into the project, and this was rule of thumb. I had a meeting with the chairman of Sony, and I said, look, we're going to do this. If you're going to support it, we'll do it. And they said, but is George going to do it? And I went back to George, and his words, I won't go into the full length, but basically what it amounted to was this. I didn't promote it the first time round, so why the fuck am I going to promote it this time round? Words.
Words like that. One of the things that occurred to me watching it again this time, probably even more so this time with the extended cut and the more, is the emotional honesty of what George did, not just in his art and his music, but also how he conveyed that as well as a person. And to that point, when you were making this film, to go back and be prepared to have that archive footage of, you know, his private life out there, and just it just felt like that's such a part of his character.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was all about integrity with George, really, wasn't it? And I mean, we pretty much dealt with everything in this film, you know, from in very many ways from the arrest in LA to cruising on Hampstead Heath to, you know, prison. I mean, you know, and how George addressed it in the film. I mean, we dealt with it all. Interestingly, we were talking earlier on, and I mentioned something. George had this rare ability to, and he mastered this at a very young age. He had this ability to disarm his critics, and he did so by sort of self-mocking. I mean, after the arrest in LA, I mean, the first thing he did is went on Michael Parkinson, and you know, he cracked that joke, didn't he? You know, he said, you know, it's great to be on here. You know, my mum used to let me sit up and watch this at night, but never thought I'd have to take my willy out to get on the show, you know? And the audience fell about roaring with laughter, and that was how George, you know, he held his hand up and you know.
Yeah.
And that comes across in the film, and we wanted to show that, and we also wanted to show George's sense of humour, which I think comes across, you know, yeah.
I think that's kind of a part of that, as well as all the music.
Yeah.
People, an entire generation, the British.
But that's why people love him. I mean, you know, the Snappy Snaps thing. You know, someone wrote Wham across it. I mean, you know, it's like he is part of the fabric in the UK. People just love George. You know, and he holds his hands up and says, "I'm sorry, I'm wrong." You know, okay, fair enough. But, you know, people love him, and at the same time, they love his music. You know, he wrote the soundtrack for generations, young and old.
Yeah.
And you know, they still, and it's an interesting thing actually. After George died, and we were putting the marketing plans together for the album, I looked at different companies to put the TV commercials together. And did you see the black and white, the negatives and the superlatives? Yeah. And we went from like blue chip companies to, you know, different companies. And at the other end, we found this company called Liberty, actually, who were based in Brixton or Hoxton Square, Brixton and Hoxton Square, and you know, and when we were talking to them, they came to me and they said, "Listen, it's really interesting, David. You know, we get asked all the time to put, you know, marketing campaigns together for artists who want to touch a new demographic, you know, and we find it really difficult, you know, when someone is there and just holding their thumb up on the front of an album cover or whatever, you know, you can't put a circle into a square." They said, but the interesting thing is in our research that with George, there is this dialogue that's going on with all these young people, and it's not about music, you know, it's just about his work with charity and who he is and what he means to them. And we realised not only does George touch people with his music, but from all ages, you know, people understand who he was. And I think when you have a person who has integrity or who is that honest, you know, it goes a long way, and people buy into that. It's not a false sale, and so that's very much the fabric of who he is. I hope that's the right question.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think we're connected to his honesty, and
yeah,
kind of,
totally.
It was his truth.
Do you mind if I just throw in something? I work with the courts. I would love George to have known exactly who his fans were in those courtrooms. When he was in Brent and he was in the other magistrate's court, George would laugh if he knew all the fans he had.
Oh, that's very sweet. I think really,
I think the top.
Yeah, of course. but I mean, you know, I think everybody loves George. I mean, it's just, you know, he was was just, it was a national treasure. Very sweet, very sweet.
I think the last thing I was going to ask before because we're going to go to Q&A in a minute, so
I beg your pardon.
everyone who's no, not at all. But everyone who's got start thinking because we're going to go and ask you a question. So you do want to do.
Well, this is good though, isn't it?
It is going. I'm loving it.
Yeah, me too.
It's working for me. What I was going to say was, obviously, when you were making the film, and you said yourself at the earlier season when you introed it, that you ended it literally a day that coincides with what happened.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And it just feels that this film being the final, George's final work, not the irony of it, but it just feels so apt in a way.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's not really a question I have there. But I just
It's all very odd, isn't it? Really.
that he would choose to embark on this project that then becomes the last.
Well, it's bizarre, really. I mean, and I've said this before, and I guess, this is out there. I mean, we pretty much cut it together in its full piece with everything bar Kate, Adele, and Chris at the end.
Yeah.
And we basically assembled the cut to show our mums and dads at Christmas, and it really is his work, and you can feel that, can't you? You can feel that, yeah. Did you like the Adele track at the beginning?
Yes.
Amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
The Chris might be a no. It
Really?
It's too raw.
Every time.
Yeah. I was gonna. We talked about this. For me, it's the Adele thing, really. Just because when we kind of got into doing that, it was just a chance that we put her at the front of the film, actually, because it was originally going to be Kate opening, and Kate was a great friend, and everybody that contributed, from Stevie, Elton, the supermodels. I mean, they came with open arms, and everybody just wanted to be a part of this, really wanted to be a part of it. And it was an amazing journey and experience. But the Adele thing was when the Grammys approached me about doing something. I basically I contacted her, and we had a chat about it, and she loved that track, and she got Hans Zimmer involved, and sent us through one of the first sort of demos of it, and it just blew our mind. And then basically one thing led to another. She did the performance at the Grammys, but then afterwards went back. It's not that bad, is it? But she basically went in and re-recorded it. That's a re-record. And then and I was talking to the one of the guys, the chairman of Sony, and he just said to me, "You've got to get her at the front of this film." So I basically, it was so simple, and she was such darling. She's so amazing. I basically called her up, and she said, "Yeah, absolutely, yeah." And we just put that in, and the deal, it was super easy, super fluid. They were just absolutely brilliant. And the same with Chris at the end. Chris went and did a re-record again, and when with Chris, actually, when the Brits was kind of the two things kind of happened in unison, and when we were putting the Brits together, and we always knew that we wanted to put this visual behind, and I think we started with the Grammys, didn't we? Yeah, and we borrowed some of that visual for the Brits, but I always knew that I wanted to do this kind of duet thing, and I also knew the pressure that there would be, putting something like that together. I mean, the amount of pressure was enormous, and I just knew that Chris Martin would be able to handle that. And George was a huge fan and loved him, and it all just fell into place. And they went in and re-recorded it again, and they were fantastic to deal with as well. Absolutely amazing. And so we had a beginning and an end to the film. Yeah.
And slightly better than Shane Ward's version on Jay McDonald and Friends.
Yes.
But that's an aside. Anyway, it's time for questions from the audience now. So,
Make them about the film then.
about the film, please, yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Hi. I'm just curious, when you were putting the film together,
Yeah.
was it always to become part of the film festival and travel around the country and the world, or was it something just for Channel 4?
No, not at all. It was a full length feature to start with. The Channel 4 thing, it just worked out because there was just this circumstance and this huge need. Do you know what I mean? But it was always a full length feature. That was from day one. And generally, what you do is you put the films into the film circuit, you know, the rounds of festivals. I think we've been in something like how many?
A little over 20 now, including
20 now, but all over the world. And I think we've got a few coming up in America. We've won a few festivals, so it's all part of a kind of strategy that you kind of get involved in when you're doing these things, and then you hopefully go on general release, and then you know.
And DVD?
Yeah, possibly DVD or Netflix or you know whatever. But yes, absolutely. You know, the thing is that we own the rights to all of our films, Symphonica, Live in London, of course the classic masterpiece I Know Him a Mile Off, and this
different.
Oh yeah, of course, a different story. Yeah, different story. Yeah.
But you know, as fans, we'll buy anything that you release. You know that, right?
Let's go right at the back.
Can I just ask why his closest friends like Shirley, Andrew, Pepsi, and obviously Andy Marahan and all of those, why were they not included in the documentary?
He didn't want to. He didn't want to. I mean, we planned, and he felt that he had dealt with. He had made literally a different story, and we sat down and while we were planning it, and he was just like, you know, no, I've done that. This is about this now. It was his choice. Yeah. I mean, you know.
And I guess, you know, you could have done a 10-part documentary series if you wanted to, if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what George wants, George gets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What George wanted, George. It was completely his decision. Yeah.
Do we have?
There was a point in the film close to the end where the question was, how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah.
And the second part of that I thought was a bit wistful, which was about the fight, his integrity, his artistic integrity, and his fight with Sony, and the fact that he lost in quotes. But I feel that this film really captures something about, you know, that it's always worth it. It's worth it to stand up. It's worth it to say what you want to say. It's worth it to take on the fight. And actually in doing that, and that being in this film forever, I think that's going to go on to inspire a lot of other people, artists or otherwise, to have that kind of courage to say, I'm going to stand up and be counted, and even if I lose, I'm still going to win in some sense. Could you say something about, it seems to be a pivotal part?
I think you said it all, haven't you?
I mean, maybe it's just a
How can I add to that?
Right, in that case, it's
But I think you put it
well done
beautifully.
for the film.
I think you put it beautifully. Yeah. I mean, the court case. Did you hear him talking about the court case and you know what this actually, you know, taking on the standard contract, and you know, and at a time, and George throughout his career did that. Shoot the dog. You know. I mean, he's always been one of those. You know. Outside.
Can I just say though, going back to what the Staley bits you just said, you did say in the film yourself, going back to the court case, which was, you know, really important, he wasn't scared of anyone after that.
No.
And that was, I love that from
Yeah.
you.
Oh, thank you. Very sweet. Thanks.
I love that.
But well put. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
very well
I mean,
put.
in
Thank
that
you.
case, my comment really is, you know, wherever he is now, I think he will be very glad that that essence was put into this film, because this film is going to go on for a very long time. It might be seen by people who never met him.
Yeah, it's it's the interesting thing is actually it's a huge showcase for his music, and I'm working with some American people, some Hollywood people at the moment, and one of the first things I do generally when I'm working with people and I want to kind of like, I wouldn't say educate them, but I want to enlighten them a little bit about George Michael if they don't. I show them a film and they just walk away thinking like, fuck, I just cannot believe all those songs. And I think I think you come away from this film with this feeling that body of work is just enormous. It's enormous and so significant.
I think George Rock again to be reminded in the film that like the demo tape when he was like a teenager had Careless Whisper.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. George wrote Careless Whisper while he was waiting for the bus to go to school. Oh God, I don't know.
The bus was involved.
He might have been.
I think we've got. We're just going to do one more question, and oh my God, I'd feel really guilty because I could only get to one person, but this gentleman here has been waiting and put his hand up.
I will go to you after. We'll do you after this. One more after this. Okay.
I think that's incredibly cathartic. And I'm just wondering now that that's what George was seeking at the time. He'd just sort of done like 25 lines. He seemed to be more comfortable looking back on his career. So was he kind of seeking?
You sound like a member of the press. Are you?
I'm not a member of the press.
Did I just say thank you for the film?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Was he kind of seeking a sort of catharsis? And was it signifying a sort of new stage of his career, possibly?
No, I don't think so. I just think that George, one of the things you don't hear in this film is that's in the Kirsty Young interview. He just wanted to talk about his career and the events of his life, firsthand from him and not from everybody else. And I think that's really what this was about. It was, and it's an honest, it's an honest picture of his life, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so honest. We just do one more.
David, can I just thank you for just keeping his memory alive?
Ah,
Because as a
sweet.
fan, you're the only one that sort of speaks to us anymore, and it's just amazing. And I'm a compulsive shopper, and I just want to know if we can buy any more stuff, i.e. the Caroline True photographs, or any more stuff's going to come online.
Or a concert for fans.
Well, now you're putting me on the spot. Look, we'll never disappoint you, let's put it that way. Let's leave it at that.
But this film,
And we've just made the film. I'm just coming up for air.
When Will Turn to Gold be on Spotify?
Oh, well.
I've been waiting. We're going to keep waiting.
Go then, one more.
What's very well crafted about this is we've all known that interview when he's kind of very relaxed and he's doing the thing about, oh well, it's probably all worth nothing. What's my legacy? We've been very thing.
Yeah.
And I love the way you've shaped it in the end of the film, because he doesn't know when he gives that interview that this is going to be his legacy and his.
It was a shock when we came across that. The way the guy asks it as well.
I just love it. I can't watch the end of it. It's too raw. I would have cut it there. It's just a perfect thing, though.
Thank you.
Just beautiful.
It's quite poignant. One of my favourite bits of the film, actually, I have to say, is that last section at the end when he's singing Patience, and he starts talking about fame. And we talked about this earlier.
Yeah, that's one of the news sections that wasn't in
the
TV.
And I'm not quite sure of the wording, but he says, words to the effect of, well, I never really wanted to be different from everybody else, but I guess I am different. And it was really and that's one of the and what does he say? I can't remember exactly.
I
what
never wanted to be anyone else. When I was a child, I wanted people to come up into the street and
Yeah.
recognise me. I never wanted to be anyone else.
No, not that bit. I'm talking
I
about
think it was more that, it was that quote wasn't it, about him saying that he finally had accepted that he was different from people.
Yeah,
who paid.
exactly.
Like Madonna and
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
He felt different from
And I feel
everybody.
that's quite. I feel that's one of the very strong moments in the film. You know.
But he shouldn't have criticised himself, basically.
Yeah. Do you enjoy it?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. And thanks everyone for coming tonight. It's very much appreciated.